What's going on, everybody? It's Max the Catfish here, and today I'm bringing you my beginner's guide to V Rising. If you're just getting started in the game and want a quick orientation to what you're getting into and really what the first, let's say 30 to 60 minutes are, we're going to jump right into it with how to get started and what the game plays like, with a bunch of tips and tricks especially designed for beginner players. When starting a new game in V Rising, you'll need to choose whether to play on a private server, either solo or with your friends, or join a public dedicated server. I'll talk a little bit about the difference between server types at the end of this video, but once you've chosen a server and customized your character, you'll enter the tutorial cemetery. It's a private region specific to you where you can learn the basic mechanics of combat, crafting, and exploration without worrying about the effects of sunlight, PvP attacks, or challenging mobs. Each area in V Rising is full of destructible and lootable items, enemies with varying loot, and secret places to explore, but for now, focus on completing the objectives in the upper left-hand corner of your screen. Each quest unlocks new crafting abilities to help you progress in the game, and be sure to get comfortable with those starting combat abilities you have. You start off with 3 combat abilities. A movement ability is bound to your spacebar called Veil of Blood, that performs a dash in the direction that you're holding the movement keys. After using Veil of Blood, the damage of your next attack within 3 seconds is increased by 25%, and you'll heal yourself for 5% of your HP. To the right of that is Shadow Bolt. That's your strongest single target spell ability in the game, and it deals 200% of your spell power to its target. Your spell power can be seen by pressing Tab and checking your character screen, and can be increased by gaining new gear and new items. And lastly is your counter ability, Bloodright, which is bound to your C key. Activating your counter just before an enemy hits you with a melee attack or a ranged attack will absorb that damage and cause a shockwave to push and damage all enemies around you. You should practice using this ability before leaving the cemetery, because it's certainly the most challenging one to get a mastery of. Keep in mind that Bloodright doesn't work against AoE abilities that cast a red circle on the ground. It only works with single target attacks against you. After you craft your chest and leg armor, you'll need to leave the cemetery in search of animal hides to finish your gloves and your boots. Jumping down off the cliffside, you'll enter the Farbane Woods, which is the game's first and largest area. Here, you'll hunt and feed on creatures, you'll build your first castle and engage in PvP with other players if you're playing on a PvP server. PvP servers give you about 30 to 60 minutes of PvP protection, which will prevent players from being able to attack you during that time. So use it to get your bearings and build a small base to stash your belongings. Those animal hides can be found from killing wolves, deer, and bear. You'll find some actually nearby the entrance to the Farbane Woods, and they should be enough to finish off your first set of armor. Characters in V Rising don't have levels in the traditional sense. You don't level up by killing monsters or defeating bosses. Instead, your power is determined by the quality of your gear by a number called your gear score. That's to the left of your health bar over your head. Use this to get a sense of how you compare to enemies before entering combat. Enemies with a similar power to your own will have yellow levels, enemies that give you a bit of a challenge will have their level marked in red, and enemies that are far above your gear score will have skulls instead of a level number altogether. By now you should know that your HP is displayed both over your head and in the bottom left-hand corner of your screen, along with all of your equipped equipment and any buffs for your character, whereas your abilities and any debuffs are located in the bottom right of your screen. In between these two is your blood pool, and this is really important. It shows how much blood you currently have, and if you scroll over it, it'll show you its type and its quality. You'll need to feed on living creatures often in V Rising. I mean, you're a vampire after all, and you can feed on weakened enemies below 30% HP by pressing F. Doing so fills your blood pool and gives you a set of bonuses depending on the quality of that blood. Blood type determines what bonuses you gain when you feed. So creatures give you the creature blood type that increases your movement speed, damage reduction, and health generation, whereas human blood comes in many different types. Quality of blood determines how large of a bonus you'll receive from feeding. So 1% quality blood is practically worthless, and 100% quality blood will unlock the full benefit of that blood type. Each time you feed, your blood pool fills completely, and your blood type and quality will be replaced with the new blood type and quality of your host. So make sure you don't accidentally feed on an enemy with a lower blood quality or a blood type that you don't currently need, unless your blood pool is almost completely empty. One trick you can actually use is to feed on an enemy and press the left mouse button before feeding completely. This cancels the feeding, instantly kills the enemy, and it won't replace your blood type or quality. It's a really powerful combat tool that you can use to quickly take down NPCs. Blood in your blood pool drains over time, and different abilities drain it even quicker, so it's not possible to keep a powerful blood type forever. If your blood pool is completely empty, you're going to quickly lose HP. That doesn't kill you, but it will leave you vulnerable to a one-hit kill from even the weakest of enemies. So keep an eye on your reserves that you have in your blood pool. Also keep an eye on the time marked by the dial to the left of your minimap. During the nighttime, you're free to roam around without worry, but the sunlight in the day can kill you. Sunlight builds up quickly when standing in it, and after a while, it'll start to damage you until you find shade. Another tip about avoiding sunlight, you might just find yourself caught out in combat during the daytime. You can use that feeding trick I taught you earlier to reset your sunlight exposure mid-combat, and it might just save your life during a tense battle. Your next few quests will have you craft axes and a mace, which are your primary gathering tools, but they work doubly well as combat weapons as well. Use your axe to cut down trees, and your mace to mine stone, metals, and gems. Your starter mace won't be strong enough to gather copper, sulfur, or gemstones just yet, so you're going to need to upgrade it at your castle. Castle building is a requirement in V-Rising. It's how you're going to craft new gear, new weapons, and improve your gear score. And the placement of your castle is equally important, especially if you're playing on public servers. I recommend you find a large, empty, preferably elevated area to build. And if you build it on a hill, you'll be able to block off the staircases that lead up to it. That's going to prevent other players from accessing or building in your territory. Just don't be too mean about it. Castles built too close to one another are going to prevent each other from expanding normally. In the late game, you're going to have a massive castle with individual rooms for various production specialties, so try to avoid placing down your castle heart in areas that the tooltip says are cramped. Your castle heart is, well, it's exactly that. It's the living heart of your castle, and you need to continuously feed it blood essence to keep it alive, or your castle will fall into a state of decay. Decaying castles can be damaged by other players on both PvP and PvE servers, and if players reach your castle heart, they can either destroy it or take over your entire castle. So protect your heart at all costs, and keep it topped up with blood essence dropped by living creatures. To expand and build your castle, you have to place down borders. Once a border's been placed, you can build walls and production buildings and cosmetic objects on it. If you make a mistake in placing any of these objects, you can always deconstruct them within a couple of seconds for a 100% refund. Otherwise, you'll still get back 75% of the materials that you used to create them when deconstructing. But one note that took me some time to figure out is you can also deconstruct and refund borders, especially if you accidentally place them in the wrong spot. But you'll always need to deconstruct everything that touches them, including the walls and the pillars built on them. That may even require you to deconstruct adjacent walls, not touching the border, in order to deconstruct the pillars and then the border itself. You can also move production buildings around your castle freely without deconstructing and reconstructing them. You can even move your castle heart. Just know that you have to deconstruct the border in the location that you plan to move it first. With your palisades built and your castle heart fed, you can begin crafting new items and equipment using the sawmill and the workbench. You're going to be tasked with improving your gear score to 15, at which point you'll gain access to the Blood Altar recipe and the quest to find and kill an alpha wolf. The Blood Altar enables you to track down powerful bosses called V-Blood Carriers that grant you new abilities and recipes when killed. You can see which recipes you'll gain when killing each boss at the Blood Altar. And when tracking a V-Blood Carrier, the scent of blood will waft towards your character every few seconds, guiding you in their direction. Take down the V-Blood Carrier and you'll instantly gain their abilities, plus any extra recipes they might be giving you. Lastly, in the early quests, you'll be tasked with building a research desk, which is where you can gain improved armor and weapons outside of V-Blood Carriers and the quest line itself. You'll find recipe schematics around the world in chests or dropped from enemies that, when brought back to the research desk, will unlock that recipe for you to craft. You can also find and spend 50 paper at the research desk to unlock a random unknown recipe. If you're looking for more tips and tricks for beginners, don't forget to check out our top 20 beginners tips and tricks video, where I give you a spoiler-free introduction to the game and a whole bunch of neat things you might want to know for your first couple days. Those are the basics of V-Rising. Advance the quest line, hunt and kill powerful V-Blood Carriers, expand your castle and build new production buildings. Use those recipes gained from research and V-Blood carriers to craft new armor and weapons, which increases your gear score. Advance the quest line further and hunt tougher V-Blood carriers, even players if you're the PvP type. Speaking of, let's quickly look at the type of servers you can join in this game because there are a lot of options. I mentioned that you can start a private game to play solo or with other players that are your friends, but I recommend you play the game on public dedicated servers. The community around V-Rising is actually really friendly, and I've had more positive experiences even in PvP than I have negative experiences. Servers are either PvE, that is without player combat, or PvP, where players can attack each other and siege each other's castles. PvP servers are further broken down into standard PvP, where you can loot a player's resources from their bags, but not their armor or their equipment. And your castle is safe from being sieged except for specific hours during the day when sieges are allowed. You should check each server to see what their settings are for this. And there's Merciless PvP, where anything goes. You can loot all of a player's belongings, even their armor and their weapons, and sieging castles is usually completely open for any player at any time. It's pretty brutal, but some players enjoy that challenge. There is a ton to explore and experience in V-Rising, and I hope this was a helpful beginner guide for you. If it was, don't forget to leave the video a like, subscribe to the channel, and I would love to hear from you what kind of videos on V-Rising you'd like to see from me in the future. Don't forget, you can catch our Twitch streams every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, where we're playing V-Rising on a PvP server, and I will catch you next time, either on Twitch or in our next video. See you then.